Hi, everybody. I'm Christina Janzer. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the Senior Vice President of Research and Analytics at Slack, and I'm a co-founder of the Future Forum. We are all here today because we are leading teams during the biggest work paradigm shift in our lifetimes. When the pandemic hit, millions of people, all of us here today, had to work in ways that we never had before. And we did it. You did it. Yes, you led through a global pandemic. You adapted, you tried new things on the fly, and I know you learned a lot. So did I. And now the world is starting to open up again. And it would be so easy to use it as a signal that we can return to normal. But I don't want to return to normal. I don't want to ignore all the learnings and all the improvements that we made over the last couple of years. And at the same time, we've got a tough economy. We've got a looming climate crisis. We've got ongoing social and geopolitical unrest. It doesn't really feel like back to normal, does it? And it won't. Maybe it won't ever again. Our pre-pandemic expectations and assumptions about work, they don't hold true in this era of constant change. And those of you who are here today, you get that. You know that in an uncertain economy, in an unpredictable era, you can't return to old leadership norms and styles. You know that there's no returning. But just because you know that, it doesn't mean it's easy to change. This kind of monumental change is hard, and we know that you're feeling the pressure. How do we know that? We've measured it. You're probably familiar with our Future Forum Pulse, which is our quarterly survey of more than 10,000 desk workers around the world. I know that many of you have used our Pulse data to guide conversations at your own organizations. One of the things that's so great about the Pulse is it allows us to see trends over time. We can track the ups and downs in employee sentiment and experience quarter over quarter, all the way since the beginning days of the pandemic. We're also able to make comparisons between different populations, so we can see the differences between different countries, different generations, different races, different genders, different job levels, different roles, and more. And we have some brand new data that we're really excited to share with you today. And what we're seeing in the data is that leaders are feeling the pressure. Check this out. Scores for overall satisfaction at work have dropped 15% over the last year among executives. We're reporting 40% more work-related stress and anxiety, and 20% worse work-life balance year over year. So here we are as leaders, and we're supposed to have all of the answers. But nobody has all the answers right now. In fact, it would be impossible to have all the answers. And it's really easy to fall into the trap of wanting to have it all figured out in the next couple of months. But that's unrealistic. This is a period of ongoing change and experimentation, and we're just at the beginning of this journey. So rather than wait for the dust to settle, let's embrace the fact that discontinuity is the new normal. And since we can't return to the way things used to be, what can we do? We can revive, we can rethink, and we can redesign work. So let's start with revive. Let's revive all the things that we loved about our organizational culture. Whatever it was that got you excited about your work, your job, or your organization. That jolt of energy that you would feel when you would solve a tough challenge together. The deep relationships you built with your colleagues. The purpose behind your work. Carry all of that great stuff forward. But let's face it, there are some things that we need to rethink about the old way. Office life in the pre-pandemic days might have served the needs for some, but it wasn't great for everyone. It wasn't great for the employee of color, who had to deal with constant microaggressions and code switching just to fit in with the office monoculture, day in, day out, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. It also wasn't great for the introvert, who struggled to participate in big meetings or who didn't feel comfortable going to happy hour to bond with their team. It also wasn't great for working parents, and I'll use myself as an example. I care deeply about my job. I'm really passionate about making work better. I also care deeply for my family. I have 3 young, amazing children. In pre-pandemic, I had to make some tough choices that I know so many people have to make as well. I used to start my commute early in the morning before my kids even woke up. Not seeing them until after work for just a few minutes before bedtime was just part of my routine. It was totally normal. Except it wasn't normal. And I didn't even realize that until I was able to experience another way over the last couple of years. Working more flexibly has allowed me to not waste my time on an unnecessary commute, giving me back up to 15 hours a week. And this is time that I'm now able to spend connecting with my family and being there for all of the important moments that I previously missed. So what's the result? I'm obviously much more connected to my family, but my work is so much better because of it. And while I was absolutely a dedicated employee before, the truth is I didn't know how long I was going to last. And now, I'm not going to pretend like I have the perfect balance, but it is so much better than it was before. And staying in the workforce no longer feels like an impossible feat. So this is my story. But what we're seeing in the data is evidence that this is a much broader issue. The data shows us that the rise in flexible work has been an absolute game changer for making workplaces more inclusive. Everybody wants flexibility, but it's in highest demand among women, working moms, and people of color. So now, let's talk about what we need to redesign, because that's really what we're here today to do. Working more flexibly on a distributed team that is scattered among different locations, time zones, and untethered from the old 9 to 5 way of working really requires redesigning how we work together. And we need to shift from the old top-down command and control style of leadership to one that is based on trust and transparency. And this might in fact be the biggest change of all, because trust and transparency is really easy to say and really hard to do. And I'm gonna guess that no matter how transparent you think your organization is, it's probably not enough. And I'm gonna guess that because of data like this. 60% of executives are not involving their employees in their future work planning. And you might wonder, what does this have to do with transparency? So let me tell you a little bit about what I mean. Transparency isn't just sharing the ultimate decision with your employees. It means engaging them in the conversation, listening to them, and ultimately accounting for their unique experiences. And this is really important because the executive experience is not the same as the employee experience. In fact, we see there's a big disconnect between employee experience and executive experience on a large range of issues. So if you're not being transparent, if you're not engaging your employees in the decision-making process, you're not going to make decisions that ultimately benefit them. And employees who say their leadership is not transparent are 3 times more likely to look for a new job in the next year. So we talked about transparency, but let's talk about trust. Because if you don't trust your employees, it's going to be impossible to enable a more flexible way of working. And I know this is really hard. When we talk to executives, you all tell us that you're worried about productivity, about connection, and about culture. And you wonder, how are you going to be able to keep a pulse on your employees? How are you going to know if they're working? How are you going to stay connected to them? How are you going to maintain culture? How can you do that if you can't see them? In fact, when we survey, executives rank productivity decline as one of the top concerns when it comes to enabling flexible work. So I want to show you some data that I hope will help put your minds at ease. Working flexibly actually increases productivity. Workers with location flexibility report 4% higher productivity scores than fully in-office workers. Now, 4% over a 40-hour work week is 1.5 hours. Imagine multiplying that over your entire workforce. And now the conversation about flexibility is often centered around location, sort of comparing working from the office to working remotely. But what we see in the data is that schedule flexibility is even more impactful. Workers with full schedule flexibility report 29% higher productivity scores than workers with no ability to shift their schedule. They also report 53% greater ability to focus. And it makes sense. If you have more control over your calendar and your calendar doesn't turn into Swiss cheese because of meetings, and you're able to work when it's good for you, you're going to be able to focus, and you're going to be so much more productive because of it. And now another common concern we hear from executives is, how do we build connection? How do we build relationships if we're not in the office together? And I think the conventional wisdom would be something like, the more time we spend in the office, the more connected we're going to feel. So let's take a look at the data. We're looking at the percentage of fully in-person employees who feel connected to their company and their manager. Now let's compare this with remote employees. Surprisingly, they're more likely to feel connected to their manager and their company values. And remote and hybrid employees are equally or more likely to feel connected to their immediate teams as their fully in-office counterparts. Now, this finding might seem counterintuitive, but think about this from the perspective of your employee. If your company offers flexibility, it's one way of them telling you that they trust you to do your work without extensive oversight. This is only going to help you feel more connected and more like you belong. Your manager is telling you they trust you. So for those of you who are worried about your company culture, we asked workers about this directly, and this is what they had to say. Remote and hybrid workers with flexibility overwhelmingly rank flexible work policies as the #1 driver in improving company culture. Not drinks, not free food. Flexible work policies itself drive company cultures. So why aren't employees experiencing this? One of the reasons that we're seeing in the data is that there is a divide between executives and the rest of their team on using digital tools. Leaders will often say, I know my team is in Slack, but I'm just too busy to be there all day. If you need me, you can always email me. And this is a real problem, because if we're not interacting on the digital platforms where our team is, it doesn't really matter where you're sitting. It's almost like you're not in the office at all. Your digital collaboration space is your new headquarters. And if you're avoiding or resisting participating there, you're not where the work is happening or where the culture and the connection is strengthening. And this is a real shift, and I get it, it's hard. But the data is telling us that flexible teams are more connected. They're more productive. They score highest for company culture and overall employee sentiment. So based on this data, we should all just enable flexibility and call it a day, right? Yes, except we know that it's not that simple. Truly embracing flexibility and getting the most out of this new way of working requires a philosophical and a cultural shift. You can't just say you're flexible and expect that it's just going to work. But we're now at a point where the best long-term plan for both leaders and executives is a total redesign. And that's what today is about. We have an opportunity to redesign and shift from C-suite centric to people centric. We can make work fit better for everyone, not just the select few. And it really comes back down to trust and transparency. And moving from the traditional top-down command and control style of leadership will be a cultural shift for many. This is the biggest leadership challenge of our lifetimes, but investing in this change is a long game. And those of us who embrace the shift will win in the short term and will also pave the way for the next generation of leaders and business winners. Thank you so much.